When I signed up for this course in the spring, I expected this class to discuss the relationship between voice and technology. I explained this to my parents and grandparents as a class that would ultimately help me to understand how technology has been used to progress the narrative voice and how it has affected us as a people. Words such as voice, theme, dictation, and point of view were some words that came to mind, and I think as a course we have covered all of these topics. Narrative. When one hears that word, typically stories come to mind. In this course we have read and listened to stories from War of the Worlds to smaller podcasts, each giving off the same type of feeling. The narrative approach to a story starts and ends with how it is conveyed. Through the radio we got certain aspects of a story that a book cannot give us. War of the Worlds, for instance, is a great example of this because the differences between the radio adaptation and the written story are so large that it almost seems like two different narratives. The radio adaptation uses background noise, pauses, sound effects, and changes the voice of the narrator in various ways. We get a sense of how the narrator is feeling just by listening to the tone of his voice. When the story gets hectic and, for the most part, scary, we hear the pitch and tone of his voice change in order to convey these emotions. This gets lost in the reading because it is left up to the reader to determine the type of emotion that should be felt. The urgency that Orson Welles reads with is completely lost when we read it ourselves. To quote my blog post about this, the background screams and sound effects add a lot to the overall feel and create an environment that is lost in the translation of the script. I think this is the overall essence of how narration relates to the use of the voice. The first project we did was a radio adaptation that forced us to rewrite a short story into a radio adaptation of our own. My group and I chose the story Harrison Bergeron, which is about a boy in a futuristic society who breaks the norm of the culture and rebels. The path we chose in rewriting it focused more on the married couple, George and Hazel, and their troubles with all of the handicaps that are in place. Since this is the future, everyone is forced to wear handicaps that make everyone the same. My group and I did a great job of really capturing the overall tone of the narrative by making it clear that the handicaps really did affect the memory of this married couple. I really enjoyed recording the voice of the broadcaster on the TV because we took the liberty to place the microphone a certain distance from Bernie in order to give the illusion that it was just background noise. Like you said in your email back to us, the final product feels like an achievement of creativity rather than merely translation. Overall, from the first script to the second one, we made some minor but important changes that not only helped to progress the story, but also made it into more of a radio adaptation than just a regular script. The biggest challenge we faced when doing this project was trying to convert the visual cues in the original story to something that would be clear in a radio version. Our script did a great job of capturing the scenes that are meant to be seen and translating them into something that can be heard. After focusing on the narrative aspects of the course, we switched gears how the voice interacts with the narrative. Listening to podcasts such as This American Life helped prepare us for the next project in this section. Listening to these audio documentaries helped me to figure out what a podcast should sound like. Originally, when discussing the voice, we came up with ideas such as objective, descriptive, and powerful. These three adjectives are what I focused on when obtaining my interviews about the pledging process. Originally, my interviews were two long conversations as I asked questions as the interview went along. While this was a good idea for an interview, it did not translate into an acceptable audio documentary. After I read your criticism, I went back, listened to the audio documentaries again and fixed it into a more spliced-up, narrative-based documentary. I added components of my own voice into it and started and ended with an introduction and conclusion. The biggest challenge I faced during this project was figuring out how to make my interviews into something that fit the parameters of this project. While working on the revision, I split the clips at each section and rearranged them into a different order. This time, both Gabe and Jesse's voice are interwoven and the questions flow more easily from one to another. My revision is a much more clear and organized finished product. The way in which voice was utilized here was to take the listener on a journey and to capture the essence of a story in our interviews. By listening to This American Life, it really made it more clear about what a successful audio documentary does and how we can create one by ourselves. Finally, the last section that we studied was how technology embodies both the narrative and voice. By looking at CADA, quality, question, quickly, quiet, it gave us a real understanding of how recent advancements in technology can dramatically change the meaning or message that the speaker is trying to get across. This film reorganized the State of the Union address by George W. Bush and put all of his words in alphabetical order. This was a moving, yet disturbing film because of the way it depicted the often criticized president. Since it reworded his entire speech, it seemed as if he had no idea what he was talking about. This is when the technological aspect of the course came into play. At the beginning of the course, we wrote down words such as entertainment, useful and controversial as descriptive words, and I think that this most recent project touched on all three. Together, you and I came up with an idea of how to utilize sports analysts' rants on certain players and coaches and convert them to analyzing non-sporting activities. This was a really fun project to work on as I scavenged all of YouTube to find the perfect clips to fit the words. This dramatic repurposing of the material and took sections of, for example, Stephen A. Smith talking about how you can't give a 7-year contract to a man as overweight as CC Sabathia, but in this case reworking it to describe Newt Gingrich. This created a humorous disruption of the original meaning of the rant and changed it into something that everyone can relate to. Overall, my project is very funny, captures the essence of the disruption and utilizes the techniques and concepts we have learned about technology and voice and creates an entirely new meaning to the words that are being said. In conclusion, throughout the 3 projects we did, and the podcasts and videos we have watched and listened to, my understanding of how the voice can be altered and manipulated through technology has proved to be a very useful and interesting concept. Learning the new ways in which the voice blends with technology has opened my eyes and ears to the way we listen to news, radio, and even sporting events. This course has dramatically altered the way in which voice and technology interact, and I will be taking the useful information I've learned throughout this course onto the next phase in my life.